This happened during my first deployment, and it's not something I talk about much, but every time I see someone sharing their creepy experiences online, I think about it, and it still doesn't make sense to me. I was 21, stationed at a small outpost in a rural part of Afghanistan. There were only about 12 of us out there, and the base wasn't anything special, just a few structures, some barriers, and a whole lot of empty desert and hills surrounding us. I was on night watch, which, if you've never done it, is basically just you sitting in the dark for hours staring at nothing. We had a guard rotation, and mine was from midnight to 4 a.m. Most nights, nothing happened. You'd hear animals sometimes, or the wind picking up sand and hitting the walls, and that's about it. You get used to the silence out there, and after a while it stops being peaceful and starts feeling heavy, if that makes sense. About 3 weeks into our rotation, I was on watch like normal. It was around 2 a.m., and the night was dead. Quiet. No wind, no animals, nothing. I was sitting behind the sandbags with my rifle and my night vision, and I was scanning the hills to the east like we were supposed to do every few minutes. That's when I saw something moving. At first I thought it was a dog or maybe a goat because they wandered around out there all the time. But then I put my night vision on it, and it wasn't an animal. It was a person. They were walking slowly across the ridge, about 300 meters out, just moving in a straight line from left to right. I watched them for a minute, and something about the way they moved felt wrong. They weren't walking like a normal person. Their arms weren't swinging, and their body was stiff, almost like they were gliding. I radioed it in quiet and said I had eyes on a single figure moving along the east ridge. My sergeant told me to keep watching and report if they changed direction. So I did. I kept my night vision locked on them, and they just kept going in that same straight line, same speed, same stiff movement. Then they stopped. They stopped and turned toward the base. I could see them facing our direction, and even through the night vision, I couldn't make out any features, just a dark shape standing completely still on the ridge, looking right at us. I radioed again and said the figure had stopped and was now facing our position. My sergeant came up to the post and got on the night vision himself. He watched for a few seconds and said it was probably a local and not to worry about it. He told me to keep eyes on them and went back inside. So I sat there watching this person stand on that ridge without moving for what I swear was at least 10 minutes. They didn't shift their weight or turn their head or move at all. Just stood there facing us. Then they started walking again, but this time they were walking directly toward the base. Same pace, same stiff movement. I radioed in and said the figure was approaching. My sergeant came back and 2 more guys came with him. We all watched as this person walked straight toward us, slow and steady. When they got to about 150 meters out, my sergeant called out through the megaphone in the local language, telling them to stop and identify themselves. They didn't stop. He called out again louder, and they kept coming, same exact pace, like they didn't hear it at all. At about 100 meters, my sergeant fired a warning shot into the air. The sound cracked through the silence and echoed off the hills. The figure stopped. It just stopped right there and stood still again, facing us. We were all tense, and I had my rifle up and ready. We waited. Nobody said a word. After about 30 seconds, the figure turned to the left and started walking in that direction. Same stiff movement, same pace. We watched it walk all the way across the open ground until it disappeared behind a hill to the north. My sergeant told us to stay alert for the rest of the night, but nothing else happened. The next morning, a patrol went out to check the area where the figure had been walking. They found footprints in the dirt, bare footprints, no shoes, and the weird thing was the footprints were in a perfectly straight line. When you walk normally, your feet land slightly left and right because of the way your hips move, but these prints were in a single straight line, one directly in front of the other, like someone walking on a tightrope. The patrol followed the prints for about half a mile, and they led to a small abandoned compound that had been empty for years. They searched inside and found nothing. No person, no belongings, no sign that anyone had been living there. But in one of the rooms on the back wall, someone had scratched tally marks into the stone. Rows and rows of them. One of the guys counted and said there were over 300. Under the tally marks, there was something else scratched into the wall. It was in a language none of us recognized, And we had guys on our team who spoke the local dialects. We reported it, and command basically said it was probably just a local with mental health issues wandering around at night. They told us to note it and move on. And we did. We moved on, but it happened again 4 nights later. Same time around, 2 a.m. Same ridge to the east, same figure walking in that same straight line. This time I wasn't on watch, but the guy who was came and woke a few of us up. We went to the post and watched through the night vision. Same thing, they walked, stopped, turned toward the base and stood there. We did the whole routine again, called out, fired a warning shot. They stopped, turned and walked away behind the same hill. And just like before, the morning patrol found bare footprints in a perfect straight line leading back to the same empty compound. This time they checked the wall with the tally marks, and there were 2 new ones scratched in fresh. The stone dust was still on the ground beneath them. It happened 2 more times over the next 3 weeks, always the same. Same figure, same movement, same time of night. After that, our rotation ended and we were moved to a different position. I asked the unit that replaced us a few weeks later if they had seen anything strange on the East Ridge at night, and the guy I talked to got quiet for a second and then just said, yeah. He didn't elaborate and I didn't push it. I've been home for years now and I've told maybe 3 people this story. Most people think it's just some local who was messing with us or someone who wasn't right in the head. And maybe they are correct, maybe that's all it was, but I was there and I watched that figure through my night vision more than once, and something about the way it moved didn't look right. It didn't look like a person walking. I don't know how else to describe it other than it looked wrong. The tally marks are what get me the most. Over 300 marks on that wall in a compound where no one lived, and 2 fresh ones added the morning after it showed up for the second time. Someone or something was keeping count. I still don't know of what. I don't tell this story to many people because the ones I have told either don't believe me or they get this look on their face like they wish I hadn't said anything. This happened in 2012 during my second deployment. I was 24 and we were stationed at a forward operating base in a province I won't name. The base was small, maybe 30 of us total, and it sat on the edge of a valley with dense tree lines on 2 sides and open ground everywhere else. There was an abandoned village about 1 kilometer to the south. Maybe 15 or 20 buildings, all made of mud and stone, all empty. Command told us it had been cleared and vacated years ago due to fighting in the area. We were told not to go near it unless ordered to, but we could see it from the south post. During the day, it was just a bunch of crumbling walls and dark doorways. At night, you couldn't see it at all, and somehow that was worse. About a week in, one of the guys on night watch, a kid named Torres, came back from his shift looking pale. At breakfast, he told a few of us that around 3 a.m. he had heard what sounded like a child singing, faint and far off, coming from the direction of the village. He listened for about 5 minutes, and then it stopped. We gave him a hard time about it, and he laughed it off, but I could tell it bothered him. 2 nights later, I was on watch from 1 to 5 a.m. Clear night, no clouds, barely any wind. Around 3:15, I heard it. A child's voice, faint and distant from the direction of the abandoned village. It wasn't words, exactly. It was like a melody, a slow repeating pattern, going up and then down, over and over. It sounded like a little girl. I sat there frozen, just listening. It went on for maybe 3 or 4 minutes and then it stopped. The silence after was somehow worse than the sound itself. I radioed in and my sergeant came up and sat with me for the rest of the shift. We didn't hear it again that night. Over the next week, 5 different guys on night watch reported the same thing, always between 2 and 4 a.m., always from the village, always a child's voice singing the same slow melody. Command finally sent a patrol to check the village during the day I was on that patrol. 8 of us went out fully geared, moving building by building. Every structure was empty. Dirt floors, crumbling walls, nothing inside except dust and rubble. No footprints, no food, no fabric, nothing to suggest anyone had been there in years. Until we got to the last one. It was the farthest building on the south end, slightly larger than the others. The main room was empty like all the rest, but there was a doorway in the back wall leading to a smaller room. One of our guys went in first with his flashlight and stopped in the doorway. I came up behind him and looked over his shoulder. The room was small, maybe 8 by 8 feet. On the floor in the center was a circle drawn in ash or some kind of dark powder. Inside the circle were small bones arranged in a pattern. Around the circle on the walls, someone had drawn symbols in what looked like charcoal. They covered every wall, floor to ceiling. Hundreds of them. None of us recognized them. In the far corner of the room, there was a small wooden chair, the kind a child would sit in. It was facing the wall. Sitting on the chair was a bundle of cloth wrapped tightly and tied with string about the size of a small child. One of the guys reached for it, and our sergeant told him not to touch anything. We photographed everything, reported it, and left. That night, nobody wanted to be on watch. I wasn't on the rotation, but I couldn't sleep. Around 2:30 a.m., the singing started again. This time it was louder, enough that you could tell it was closer than before. The guy on watch radioed it in, and two of us went up to listen. We stood there in the dark, listening to that same melody, drifting across the empty ground between us and that village. Then it stopped. And about 10 seconds later, it started again, but this time it wasn't coming from the village. It was coming from the tree line to our east, the opposite direction. Like whatever it was had moved over a kilometer. In a few seconds of silence, we aimed our lights toward the tree line and saw nothing. The singing stopped after about a minute. I stood there with my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. The next morning, command sent a team from the main base to examine the room. They took the bundle, and I was told later that inside were more bones, small ones, along with dried plants and some kind of dark paste. The intelligence guy said it was related to folk practices in the region, tied to old beliefs that most locals had abandoned long ago. They cleared the room and burned everything. That night, the singing didn't come, or the next night, or the night after that. For 4 straight days, there was nothing, and we started to relax. Some of the guys joked that burning the stuff must have worked. On the 5th night, I was on watch from midnight to 4, the quietest night since we arrived. At exactly 3 a.m., I heard something directly behind me. Not from the village, not from the tree line. From inside the base, it was the singing. The same melody, the same child's voice, but it was close. Right behind me, maybe 20 feet away, somewhere between the sleeping quarters and the supply building. I turned around slowly and pointed my light across the base. Nothing. Just empty ground and closed doors and silence. But for a split second, right before the singing stopped, I saw something move between 2 of the buildings. Small and low to the ground, and fast. Too fast to get a clear look. It was there, and then it wasn't. I didn't radio it in. I just sat there for the remaining hour of my shift, with my back against the sandbags and my rifle across my chest, trying to control my breathing. In the morning, I told my sergeant privately. He looked at me for a long time and then said 2 other guys had already reported hearing the singing inside the base on previous nights, but he had kept it quiet because he didn't want panic to spread. He told me to keep it to myself. We were at that base for another 6 weeks. The singing came and went. Some nights nothing. Some nights distant from the village. And some nights it was inside the base, close enough that you felt like if you turned around fast enough, you'd see whatever was making it. But you never did. I finished my deployment and went home. About a year later, I ran into Torres at a base back in the States. We grabbed food, and eventually the conversation came around to that place. He told me that after our unit rotated out, the next unit reported the same thing. They sent another team to the village and found the circle redrawn on the floor of that same room with fresh ash. The chair was back in the corner, and there was a new bundle of cloth sitting on it. Nobody had been seen entering or leaving that village. The cameras on the south post never captured a single person going in or out, but someone or something kept. Putting those things back, Torres told me he still hears the melody sometimes when he's falling asleep. Not for real, just in his head, like a song stuck on repeat. I told him I understood because I hear it too. It's been over 10 years now, and some nights right before I drift off, I catch it. That slow melody going up and then down in the voice of a little girl, singing in a language I have never heard.